Hello, everyone. Happy Monday. Welcome into this special edition of GC Live. And obviously, it's not Chris or Wes this week. It is going to be me taking over for this Monday edition of GC Live. Jack Veltri for GamecockCentral.com reporting here. And yeah, well, like I said, welcome into this special edition of GC Live. And should be a good one. We're going to talk a lot of baseball today. Got a lot of things to talk about. Just met with Mark Kingston right before him and the team left for Hoover, and I just got back from Knoxville the other day, and back in Columbia I'm probably at my apartment for 30 minutes today, and then I'm hitting the road for Hoover, Alabama in a little bit here, and I'm getting ready to go cover my first SEC tournament for baseball. And look, I've heard the stories about Hoover and how South Carolina really hasn't fared well there, but maybe something will change this year now that I'm on the beat and going. But we'll have to see. But welcome in, everyone. Like I said, my name is Jack Veltri. I am South Carolina or Gamecock Central's baseball beat writer, and I've been covering the team all season. As most of you know, if you have anything you want to talk about, any questions you have for me on this episode, be sure to drop them in the comments section, and I will make sure to get to them. But without further ado, let's get into what Mark Kingston had to say to us. So just a few minutes ago, he did announce that Dylan Eskew will be starting tomorrow afternoon in the first round of the SEC tournament against Alabama. And look, I think it's probably not too bad of a decision. The way Kingston is probably going to go about it is he won't use Dylan Eskew more than he needs to. You'll probably see Eskew throw maybe 2-3 innings tomorrow and then turn it over to the bullpen. And the reason I say that is, well, for one, Kingston kind of insinuated that's going to be the case. But when you look at Saturday in Knoxville, Eskew was the starter for that game, and he went 2 innings, giving up 1 hit, no runs. He did get up a walk, but he threw 29 pitches and looked fine out there, right? And then you turn the game over to the bullpen with Matthew Becker throwing 2 innings, Eli Jones throwing 2 innings, and Chris Veach also throwing 2 innings. So, the reason I think they're going with this right now is because Kingston even admitted to it. They really don't have a starting rotation right now. Garrett Gainey's probably your best starter. And then outside of that, Eli Jones isn't really doing too hot right now. He pitched out of the bullpen over the weekend. So that should kind of tell you that, they don't have a rotation that's really set in stone right now. So they're going to try this and see how it goes. Now it could work. It could blow up in their face. But I think the fact of the matter is, you saw it on Saturday, and honestly, it wasn't too bad. If it weren't for 2 defensive mistakes that South Carolina made in the infield, in that, when Eli Jones was coming out of relief on Saturday, we might be talking about South Carolina only losing that game 2-1. Who knows? But the point is that I think things looked a lot better when you had every guy going one time through the order and getting your innings that way. Now, is it sustainable long term? I'm not sure about that. I think when you let's assume that South Carolina is going to get into a regional, and we'll break that down a little more in depth on why that might be the case. But what I'm saying is that lost my train of thought. With the way they have this set up right now, I think getting 2 innings out of your guys is good. And I also asked Kingston straight up, like, who's not available tomorrow? And he thought about it for a second, and then he said that no one should be not available tomorrow. So everyone should be pitching tomorrow if need be. I think that would even include Garrett Gainey, and you could also see a guy like Ty Good come in there. I think this might actually work out for South Carolina. And if SQ pitches like he did on Saturday, I know he got roughed up when he did pitch against Alabama in late March, but that was then. This is a whole different season. And yeah, so like I said, things start tomorrow in Hoover. South Carolina gets their first round matchup with Alabama at 2 p.m. approximately on SEC Network. And it should be hopefully a good one, but we'll have to see. So now that that's out of the way, we'll get into a little bit of what happened this weekend with Tennessee. Obviously, South Carolina is going to be coming into Hoover really slumping right now. They have lost 6 in a row, and look, there is a possibility they could lose 7 games in a row heading into Selection Monday with the NCAA tournament selection show. But for right now, they've lost 6 in a row, and they really do need a win here. And look, so this weekend was, I don't think it was as bad as the Georgia weekend, but it still had that same feel. Um, let's kind of break each game down real quick. You start with Thursday. Ty Goods on the mound starting, and I think everyone thought in their right mind that was the right decision. But obviously, when you're facing a team that is as good as Tennessee, I mean, number one team in the country, going to be the number one seed in the SEC tournament, potentially the number one overall seed in the NCAA tournament. This is a very good team from top to bottom, and it all starts with Christian Moore. I mean, he took good deep, or he took good deep twice in Thursday's game, and from there, I mean, could get up 3 homers and only lasted, let's see, only lasted 4 innings, giving up 6 runs on 5 hits, struck out 4, and he walked 4. And the big thing that I noticed with Good was that his command was just not there. I mean, half his pitches were thrown for balls, and he fell behind in a lot of counts. And as a result, he had to kind of throw some gimme pitches, and Tennessee hit them a long way. And that's a small ballpark there. And I think maybe with the way Hoover Met is, apparently it's a bigger park, like a pitcher's park, I guess. And I guess I'll be the judge of that when I'm there tomorrow. But apparently that's the case. I don't think it can get much smaller than Lindsey Nelson in Knoxville. That stadium is tiny, man. I mean, you could poke the ball out of there, and it's going a long way. But with Thursday's game, I mean, the starting pitching wasn't good once again. I think your offense was a little better. I mean, you had 8 hits. You had your RBI chances. But honestly, I mean, when you're going 1 for 8 with runners in scoring position and 3 for 14 with runners on and 3 for 12 with 2 outs, I mean, you're not going to win a lot of games that way. And honestly, I think Kingston has said that was one of South Carolina's better offensive performances all year. I don't see it. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm missing something. But look, I mean, when you're facing a team like Tennessee, you can't be giving them any chance. I mean, you got to score early. And look, South Carolina did that. They scored right away with an Ethan Petrie solo homer. But after that, things just really fell apart, and they really couldn't recover. So game 2. Now, this is where I think a lot of people's frustrations are. This was definitely in my opinion, at least, the most winnable game of the weekend. You get Garrett Gainey starting on the mound, and as the story goes, he pitched 5 solid innings against this lineup and looked really good. And then you go into the 6th, and he gives up a solo homer to Christian Moore, and that cuts the deficit to 3-1. And South Carolina's up by 2 runs. What do you do in that situation? Gainey's pitch count's building up. He's only thrown, I think, against Georgia 2 weeks ago, he threw 81 pitches. So you're bordering around that pitch count right now. So do you turn to a reliever? And obviously South Carolina had guys warming up, but Kingston decided to roll with his best pitcher. And I don't blame him in that point, from that point. But where it gets tricky is later in the inning. Tennessee, 3rd time through the order, continues to hit really well. They get back-to-back singles, and you got 2 on with 2 outs, I think. And instead of pulling him, that is where I would have pulled Gainey, because look, he's obviously struggling, and this is the 3rd time through the order. So why not get a fresh arm in there, like Chris Veach, for instance, who's been known to get out of jams time and time out, and instead, Kingston rolls the dice with Gainey, leaves him in, wants to have him finish the job, get through 6 innings, and it does not pay off as he gives up a 3-run homer, and Tennessee takes the lead the rest of the way. And yeah, that was one of 2 bad pitching decisions, in my opinion, on Friday. That was I don't care, man. That was just not a good decision. I get it. Like, you want to ride with your best pitcher, but at the same time, you were asking way too much out of him, in my opinion. I mean, Gainey went 93 pitches. Now, at this point, he should be built up to where he can throw 100 pitches in an NCAA tournament game, or in Hoover if you want him to start. But, I think you have to also understand that these guys have limits. And Gainey, I'm sure he wanted to pitch that entire inning. I'm sure he didn't want to let Kingston take him out, or Matt Williams, whatever the case might be. But the point is, I mean, South Carolina had a chance to win that game. You're up 3-0, and then you see 4 runs just get scored right away. And what also is part of the issue is that, look, South Carolina's offense did nothing outside of a 2nd inning rally on Friday. And that's also part of the reason why they lost that game. But at the same time, Kingston's pitching decisions just were not good that night. And so the second decision he made was, I think it was the 7th inning, and Jake McCoy was in the game, and he put 2 runners on with 1 out, and it's a 1-run game. Keep that in mind. Keep that in mind when I'm saying this. With a 1-run game, Kingston decides to bring in Parker Marlott. Now, to be fair, Parker Marlott has been solid for South Carolina this year. His ERA is around 4, so not too bad, and he's a freshman. So, this is a big spot. I mean, do you really want a freshman pitching in this type of situation? And again, where's Chris Veach? Where has he been this entire time? That's the question that continues to be asked, is why did you not use Chris Veach in either of those situations? And of course, as fate would have it, Marlott gives up a grand slam to Blake Burke, and Tennessee takes a 5-run lead and holds on the rest of the night. And any chance of winning at that point is gone. Now, if you brought in Veach, you get out of that jam, you have a 1-run deficit heading into the 8th and 9th inning. And you're telling me that South Carolina has no chance there? I mean, it felt like Kingston was punting there. That's just my opinion. That's how I feel about it. I don't agree with those pitching decisions he made. Now, his reasoning for it after the game was that he wanted to use Veach for the final 3 to 6 outs of the game. But you can't play the game that way, guys. You can't play the game that way. You cannot play the long game. You have to play in the moment, especially as a team that needs wins. I mean, South Carolina coming into Friday had been losing their last 4 games. They needed a win badly. And the fact that he's saving guys for later, I know South Carolina's pitching staff hasn't been good lately. And honestly, they weren't too terrible this weekend. But the fact that he's saving guys, I mean, what? That made no sense to me. But that's either here nor there. You move into Saturday, and I kind of referenced it before. SQ gets the start, does well. Becker comes in, pitches pretty well. He did give up a 2-out walk that led to an RBI double that would give Tennessee the early lead. But I mean, other than that, he looked fine. And then Eli Jones comes in, and his defense really didn't do him much help, but he looked good outside of that. And obviously, Chris Veach, 2 perfect innings. I mean, who would have thought that Chris Veach could go in a 4-0 game and pitch the way he did? I mean, would it have been such an issue to pitch him in a 1-run game or with a 2-run lead on Friday? We'll never know, I guess. But offensively this weekend, I mean, things just weren't that good. I think that is a big thing that kind of stood out. And look, when you look back at the Georgia series, South Carolina's offense did enough to give you a chance to win. But I think this weekend, the offense did not much at all. I mean, 7 runs in 3 games is not going to win you many ball games. And the way they hit with runners in scoring position wasn't great. They struck out a ton. They didn't walk much. And I think as a team this weekend, they hit 198. And you had a lot of guys really have awful weekends. Kennedy Jones, I don't think, had a hit. Blake Jackson wasn't great. The only one that I can think of off the top of my head that had a good weekend and would probably win player of the week or weekend for me, in my opinion, for South Carolina, would be Cole Messina. He's continued to tear the cover off the ball. He had a homer this weekend, and so did Ethan Petrie, but Messina was the one that stood out, and everyone else was kind of just, So you can't win many games when only one guy's doing damage. But, now you enter a new week. After Saturday's game, Kingston said it's a new season. The postseason's here. Obviously, South Carolina is heading into the SEC tournament, and that gets us into the next topic of discussion here. I've seen this question thrown out a lot on the Insiders Forum and Twitter and stuff, and a lot of you have been asking, is South Carolina going to make the NCAA tournament? And I wrote an article just about an hour ago, kind of giving an in-depth breakdown on, is South Carolina's resume good enough to make the postseason? And long story short, I highly suggest going to read that story. It was just posted at noon, I believe. So, definitely go check it out if you want a little bit more of an in-depth breakdown. But the short answer is I do think South Carolina is going to make it. And even without any more wins this, in Hoover, I mean, South Carolina could go 0-1 and, have a 13-18 record in SEC play. And I still think they're good enough to make the NCAA tournament. And so is Mark Kingston. And today he kind of continued on that whole precedent thing that I write about in this story about, if you have 13 conference wins and your RPI is in the top 30, you should be making the tournament. No questions asked. And I asked him, he said there's no doubt they'll make it with that sort of resume and the strength of schedule. I mean, if you look at it, they've got let's see, their RPI is 19th in the country. Strength of schedule is 7th. They've got 9 quad 1 wins and 6 quad 2 wins. And I think that's pretty good. But Kingston said that, this is an NCAA tournament team, and I kind of feel that same way. I mean, look, can you really judge this team based off of a 6-game stretch where they just did not look like themselves, and that determine where they go? I mean, sure, but you got to think about it this way. 2 weekends ago, when they were at Missouri, we were talking about potentially South Carolina hosting a super regional. Can they really fall that far in such a short amount of time to not even making the postseason? I don't think so. And some of y'all might want the season to be over and stuff, and I get it. I know the season really hasn't gone the way that some fans might expect. And look, I keep saying it. It's not 2010 anymore. It's not 2011. So if you're thinking like that, and you'll never be satisfied. But if you're thinking of the perspective of, okay, everyone in this conference is good. South Carolina is a good team too. They can run the table any minute here and go on a hot stretch and make a run. Then I think you're thinking the right way here. But it's not to understate that this week in Hoover is still very important for South Carolina. And I asked Kingston, honestly, if they got to 14 wins, how much better would that be in terms of making the tournament? And he said, if you get 14, 15, 16 wins, more the merrier, because at that point it solidifies the case. 1 win this week in Hoover, I think, gets you without a doubt into the tournament. But 13 makes it a little tougher, especially with 5 other SEC teams kind of in that same window of they got a 13-17 record. South Carolina, Florida, Alabama, Vanderbilt, and LSU are all in the same boat right now. And I think if you're ranking these teams in terms of who has first dibs on making the tournament potentially, I'd have to go South Carolina or Florida right now. And South Carolina does have the head-to-head over the Gators and Vanderbilt, and they did drop a series in Tuscaloosa earlier this year, and they didn't play LSU. So I think that all combined with the RPI, the strength of schedule, and who they've got their series wins against, I think it's good enough to make the tournament. I really think so. And we'll have to see what happens. But getting into a little bit of Alabama here, I spoke with, I don't know if you guys have read his work yet, but we brought on a writer for this summer. His name is Gamecocks, and he is helping us out this summer. Like I said, he just started last week, but and I'll let the video speak for itself here in a second. But him and I spoke this morning a little bit about South Carolina and Alabama's game tomorrow in Hoover. And there's an interesting, he has an interesting perspective on things because Graham, if you guys don't know, goes to Alabama. I think he's going to be a junior at Alabama next year, I believe. So he has an interesting perspective on covering this team a little bit. And so without further ado, I'll stop wasting time here and get straight into the video. All right, I'm now joined by the newest member of GamecockCentral.com, Mr. Gamecocks. Graham, how we doing, buddy?
I'm doing great, man. I just had the opportunity to cover Alabama softball over the weekend, and now here we go. We got the opportunity to head down to Hoover and cover the SEC baseball tournament. I'm excited.
Yeah, definitely. So Graham mentioned Alabama, and it's funny that we're in a unique position here where South Carolina is playing Alabama tomorrow, and we recently just brought Graham on to help out this summer at GC, but Graham also works with the Crimson White, which is the University of Alabama's student newspaper. Graham goes to Alabama, so we're in a unique position here where he can give us a little bit of insight on the Crimson Tide heading into this big matchup. But I want to start right there, Graham. These are 2 teams that faced off back in March. I was in Tuscaloosa for that series, and South Carolina dropped the series 2 out of 3 games. When you're looking at this Alabama team, obviously they're coming off a series loss at Auburn. Where do you feel like they're at right now in terms of heading into Hoover?
Boy, just the way that they have played away from home, it's kind of been a concern. See, here's the interesting thing is that they've only won 1 series away from home, but the interesting fact about that is that they've never been swept. See, they've at least won 1 game in every single road series. Now, how does it play when it's just a one and done here on day 1 of the tournament? I guess we'll see. But See, when they're at home, they're a far better team. Like Alabama's been able to beat teams like I think it was A&M when they were number one at the time, then Arkansas when they were number one at the time. Alabama was able to take down those teams, right? So then it's just really a contrast of who shows up, like the team that plays well when they're at home, or the team that they've kind of shown up to be on the road. We'll see what happens Tuesday afternoon.
Yeah, definitely. And obviously, this is their first year with the new head coach, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. So how do you feel like the team has kind of responded to that? Because I feel like, they've had a little bit of an up and down season. They've got some highlight series wins on their resume, but, they're kind of like South Carolina. They're in the same boat of, having the same conference record and whatnot.
Yeah. I think they've responded well. I mean, as you mentioned, they have a similar conference record, and, the SEC is a incredibly tough conference, especially in baseball. So they've done well. They, it was just a couple games short of 500 in, the toughest conference in college baseball. So, yeah, I would say that they've responded well, and they're fighting for, a good solid seed here in the NCAA tournament coming up here after conference tournament week.
Yeah, definitely. When you look at this roster, what would you give us a little bit of insight into, who you're noticing that really stands out, and if there are any, weaknesses, I guess, on this team, what would it be? Would it be like the pitching staff, the bullpen, the offense? I mean, what's kind of your 2 cents on that?
Yeah, so in terms of weakness, I would say pitching staff. I believe, it's Alabama ranks 11th in the SEC in team ERA. So yes, I would say pitching staff is definitely the weakness. Where I think there's a strength is the bats, and one of the bats that is really great is Gage Miller. Let me read you a stat here. So Gage Miller. He ranks 4th in the SEC in batting average, runs scored, and hits. So he can really play. Another guy that's been doing great. His name is Justin LeBron. Yes, his last name is LeBron. He's been really coming on the last couple weeks this season. So like a couple weeks ago when they played Ole Miss, he was in the middle of a stretch where he went eight games in a row, where an 8-game stretch where he had 6 home runs during that 8-game stretch. So he's really come on here toward the end of the season. And they've got 5 players in their batting lineup that have been hitting 330 or above here during conference play. So I would say the strength is definitely that batting lineup, especially more than half of the batting lineup, 5 out of 9 is solid.
Yeah, I definitely would have to agree with that. I'm looking back at some stats from that series, and my memory is a little foggy with that Alabama South Carolina series, just because the Gamecocks didn't win it. But looking back at that Alabama lineup, I mean, you're right. Gage Miller, he had a pair of 3-hit games in that series, and look, I mean, the big thing with that South Carolina Alabama series back then was the Gamecocks were in those games, and it took I think in the first game they gave up a run in the 8th inning that kind of made the difference in what would be a 4-3 loss. And then obviously in the middle of the game of that series, South Carolina had a chance to win, but they gave up 7 runs in the 8th. And from there, Alabama cruised to a win. And then, it took a really good play from Talmadge Lecroy at the end of that 3rd game to barely hold on for a 1-run victory. So I definitely see what you're saying with this Alabama offense and the way they're hitting right now. And speaking of right now, do you feel like they're in a good place right now offensively? I mean, are they clicking? What's kind of the what you're seeing out there?
Yeah, I think they've been clicking. Just going back the past 8 games, there's 5 of the last 8 games they've scored at least 7 runs. So these bats, they're on fire right now, and I think that they have a good opportunity to continue that this week in Hoover.
So that is a little segment from Graham and I's discussion that we had earlier today. And I will definitely go ahead and post that video on the Gamecock Central YouTube page. And you can watch the whole thing there. We go on for a little bit longer, kind of talking about things. But big shout out to Graham for joining me. Definitely appreciate it, y'all. Definitely need to go check out his work over on GamecockCentral.com. He covered some softball for us this past week. And obviously, the Gamecocks did not get out of the Durham Regional as they lost to Duke in the regional final yesterday. So their season's over. But, big shout out to Graham for joining us and jumping right into everything. So, that's a little bit of a breakdown on Alabama with kind of what to expect there. Obviously, these 2 teams faced off back in late March, and that was definitely an interesting series where South Carolina was in it, I think, in all 3 games. And like we kind of referenced, I mean, in that first game, South Carolina had a chance to win and gave up a run in the 8th inning and lost that game 4-3. And then the next night, I think Matthew Becker might have been pitching, if I'm not mistaken. You have the same situation where it's a close game, and then Alabama scores 7 runs and wins 13-6, and then the next day, obviously, the turning point for South Carolina in that series. They lost the first 2, got a big lead, played well offensively, and I think you had maybe a 9-5, 9-4 lead, and Garrett Gainey's in, and you let the lead slip away, and it gets down to 1. You got to bring Veach in, and Talmadge LeCroy makes the most heads-up play that you can make. Comes in charging a ground ball to third, a little squib ball, and instead of throwing to first and trying to get out, I think it was like 1 out maybe or something, 2 outs, I think. He pump fakes, turns around, throws to third, catches the runner going too far off third, and Will Tippett makes a great tag and gets the out to seal the deal. That was one of the craziest games I think I've seen in South Carolina this season. But obviously, they lost that series, and it's been a long time since then. And Alabama, is in the same boat as South Carolina. So I think if you can go into tomorrow and get a win, if you're the Gamecocks, I think you solidify your postseason hopes. And speaking of postseason hopes, just saw D1 Baseball posted their Field of 64 projections. And if you guys haven't figured it out yet or haven't seen, I will bring you that news real quick. As of right now, in the Clemson Regional, South Carolina is the 3 seed. And they would be paired with number 6 national seed Clemson, number 2 seed Louisiana, the Gamecocks are the 3 seed, and number 4 seed Army. So I haven't really done a scouting report on Louisiana or Army yet. So apologies. I'm reading this off my phone here. I was scrolling through Twitter and I saw that, so I thought I'd share that with y'all. But that's currently where things stand, and obviously, Clemson this year, very good team there on the other side of this state. And I think you guys can chime in on it if you want, but I got to imagine that South Carolina fans want this to happen, right? I mean, who wouldn't want to go into Clemson and do the unthinkable, pull off an upset and win that regional and have bragging rights for a long time? I mean, that's got to be what it felt like in 2010, the College World Series, when South Carolina, I think it was 2010 or 12. I can't remember. I think they played both years, but beating Clemson in the postseason, that's got to be a different feeling. So, I mean, imagine how crazy that would be. But that's the latest projection right now from D1 Baseball. I was looking to see if Baseball America had anything, but haven't seen anything yet. I did see that last week they had South Carolina out in the West Coast, I think paired with UC Santa Barbara, if I'm not mistaken. So, at this point in the game, I don't think South Carolina is going to be hosting a regional. Now, Kingston did say today, and, he said the right thing, I think, as a head coach, is that if South Carolina makes a little run here through the SEC tournament, wins 3-4 games, whatever the case might be, even wins the tournament. I know that's something that probably won't happen, but, if it does, South Carolina maybe is back in that discussion of hosting. It's not that far off, I don't think. And look, I think the fact that these sites that D1 Baseball America see South Carolina in the Field of 64 still as a 3 or 2 seed really should not leave any doubt about where this team stands come the postseason after Hoover. I think they're going to be in the tournament. I think they will be a 2 or 3 seed, probably a 3, especially if they lose tomorrow against Alabama. But we'll have to see what happens. But like I said before, I think this team is in a very good spot with making the tournament. They've done so much good this season that, look, a 6-game stretch is really going to outweigh everything else they've done. You got to think about it. I mean, you got series wins over Kentucky. Kentucky's the biggest one right now because the Wildcats are going to end up being one of the national seeds and hosting a super regional. So they even might be a 1 or 2 seed in the tournament. So we'll have to see what happens there. But you got a series win over that team, and you run-ruled them in the clincher. And then you got series wins over Vanderbilt, Florida, and Missouri. And obviously the detractors are the series loss at Bama, Ole Miss, and Arkansas A&M. But you did get wins in those series against Arkansas and A&M. So it's not all bad. And then obviously the final 6 games here have been nothing short of bad. But let's also not forget they got a midweek win over top 10 North Carolina. So I think the resume is good enough. They've played so many tough teams this year. And I get it. Like, you should beat who you play. But at the same time, this schedule they've played is brutal. It's brutal, man. Like, I think the top five of the I think it's the top five teams in the country. I was doing a little bit of research yesterday. The top five teams in the country right now are who South Carolina's played this season in series, and then obviously factor in North Carolina and Clemson into that mix. So I do think this team is good enough with the RPI and all those other numbers. But I think they're in just about as good of a spot as they can be right now. We'll have to see what happens though. So let's get into some ad reads real quick, and then I will give my final thoughts on heading into Hoover. Like I said, I'm heading straight out to Alabama as soon as I'm done here with y'all on the stream, and I appreciate all you guys tuning in and dealing with me for a little bit here. But our first sponsor is the folks over at Liberty Tax. Taxiety is that uncertain feeling you get right before doing your taxes, but you don't have to go through it alone. The tax team at Liberty Tax in Irmo, Lexington, and Columbia will walk you through the process, clear up any confusion, and guarantee you'll get the biggest possible refund or your money back. It's tax time. If you're in a hurry for your refund, call on the tax team at Liberty Tax. Fast, accurate, and guaranteed. On the other hand, though, if you think you might be owing Uncle Sam, talk to the Liberty Tax team to make sure you're not paying more than you should owe. They'll find every possible deduction for you. They're locally owned and operated, staffed by tax professionals from your neighborhood, open 99 weekdays and 9 to 5 Saturdays. There are multiple service options. You can start the Liberty Tax mobile app or through desktop portal. Make an appointment or just walk in. Give a call to upload your tax documents. And when you come in, your return will be ready to review and sign. On your screen right now, for those listening, 803-462-5576. Again, the number to call Liberty Tax is 803-462-5576. And our second sponsor of the day are the folks right above me that disappeared for a second, is the good folks over at Clint.Hammond of the Movement Mortgage Network. In need of help with your mortgage, call our good friend Clint Hammond at the Movement Mortgage Network. He's been in the mortgage industry since 2003, which allows him to help everyone from the first-time home buyer to the complicated and complex jumbo buyer. Whether you're looking to purchase a new home or refinance, nothing is more important than a well-thought-out financial strategy that comes with 5-star customer service. He's even helped out our very own Wes Mitchell and former Gamecock quarterback Perry Orth with their mortgages. So you can give our guy Clint a call at the number above, 803-771-6933. Again, the number to call Clint Hammond is 803-771-6933. And thank you to all of our sponsors who help make GC Live possible. And so we're at the tail end of our show today. And like I said, I appreciate you guys all tuning in and listening as South Carolina gets ready to head to Hoover for the SEC tournament. And look, it's no secret that this place has been a house of horrors, I guess you could say, for the Gamecocks over the years. I mean, look, I'm sure that there are some of y'all that have been watching this team for decades now and understand, been through the highs and lows, and Hoover's definitely typically, on the bottom of South Carolina's success, to my knowledge. At least that's kind of what I've seen. I obviously did not grow up a South Carolina fan or anything, or didn't really watch South Carolina baseball during the glory years. So, my history with them really dates back to 2020. And from what I've seen, Hoover's kind of been a nightmare for them. I remember the walk-off loss against Florida in the first round of the tournament in 22 to cap off a losing season. Last year, I think they beat Georgia in the first round and then lost to LSU and maybe Texas A&M. I can't remember off the top of my head, but I know Georgia and LSU, they played last year, and they only advanced so far. So with this year, I mean, what's going to be different, right? I think when you're looking at this team, I think the pitching staff's in about as good a shape as it could be. They're all going to be available. So that's the big thing, is that if you can get through tomorrow, you really have a chance to, as long as your pitching lines up the way it can, you do have a chance to at least make some sort of run. And I think one win definitely gets you in the postseason for the NCAA tournament, regardless of what happens after that. I know I've seen some people commenting, okay, would you rather have South Carolina lose the opening round game, or if they win the first game, they go 1-2? Because if you guys don't know, if South Carolina were to advance past the first round, they enter the double elimination phase and face Arkansas in the second round, and then I believe if things line up the way it should, I believe it's Georgia they would face after that. And obviously their odds against those two teams are not going to be really that good. So getting a win against Alabama, I think, solidifies your case, especially considering you're going up against a team that's kind of also on that bubble right now. And, I think there's 4 teams that are facing one another in that first round that are on the brink with that 13-17 record. Again, in my opinion, I think all 5 are going to get in. I think Vanderbilt's done enough. I think LSU's turned the corner lately, and they're the defending champs. So I don't think they're going to get left out. I think Florida has, that series win they had over Georgia this past weekend was huge for them, and they're over 500 right now. They can't go back under 500, regardless of what happens in Hoover, if I'm not mistaken. And South Carolina and Alabama obviously are in similar positions, but whoever wins this game, I do see getting the edge in terms of seeding and stuff. But I do think both are going to make it. I'd be very hard-pressed to believe that Tuesday is the final game of the season for this team. I mean, look, I know some of y'all want the season to end. I know some of y'all, let's not beat around the bush. I know some of y'all want a new coach. That I get it. But at the same time, this team is very much still capable of making some sort of run. I mean, seriously, it was just 3 weeks ago this team ruled Kentucky and took 2 out of 3 and looked like a completely different team compared to where they're at now. So it's not far-fetched that they can get back to that somehow. Obviously, it's going to take the offense doing what they've been capable of doing. It's going to take more than just Cole Messina to win a game. And your pitching staff has to do what they've got to do. And I think it lines up well tomorrow. Dylan Eskew gets the start. And then you turn it over to, I don't know who else they throw tomorrow. Probably Ty Good. I think Ty Good would probably be a good option tomorrow, don't you think? Coming out of relief, just for some reason. I noticed this with his start against Tennessee. He just cannot pitch as a starter. I think coming out of the bullpen is much better for him. And look, it's unfortunate, but you got to do what you got to do to win games. And I think he could give you 4 good innings tomorrow if you really need him to. Or you save him a little bit, use him maybe for like 2 innings, and then go from there. And who knows, maybe throw Eli Jones tomorrow. The options are endless. And I don't think that if you're Kingston and you have a 1-2 run lead in the league going, you should not shy away from using your big guns. Use Chris Veach. Use Garrett Gainey. Do what you got to do to get the win on Tuesday, and you leave absolutely zero doubt. Like, I think this is the most important game of the year for South Carolina. If they win tomorrow, then I think you can definitely count on the Gamecocks being in the NCAA tournament. If they lose, it's a little more up in the air, but I still think the resume is good enough. So time to get into a little bit of predictions as we wrap things up here. Again, thank you all for tuning in. How far do I think South Carolina is going this week? And I'll be honest, I'm going to wear this on my chin here. I was so wrong about my predictions for the Tennessee series. I said, if you missed it on Foul Balls with Joe and I last week, I said South Carolina is going to take 2 of 3 against Tennessee. And, oh, man, I was so wrong. I try to be as realistic as I can. And I do think, I'm going on a limb here again. I think South Carolina is going to win tomorrow versus Alabama. I think they're just a better team, more well-equipped to win the battle tomorrow with the pitching staff being pretty much readily all available. And then I think the offense at some point is going to get enough runs to win a game, especially with a bigger ballpark. The ball, might find the gap a little more. We'll have to see what happens. Maybe they play the long game. Who knows? And then after that, if they play Arkansas in the second round, I think they lose that game. And then they enter elimination again, and they get paired up against Georgia. I think they lose that game too. So as of right now, plug it in. I think South Carolina is going to go 1-2 in the SEC tournament. Again, I think they beat Alabama in the first round, and then they lose to Arkansas and Georgia to end their Hoover run. And honestly, that's a success in my opinion. Win the first game, and I think you're good for the NCAA tournament. But we will have to see. So again, I will be in Hoover. I'm heading out right after this, and I will be on the 5-hour trek to Alabama to go cover the SEC tournament. As far as South Carolina goes, is how long I will be there. And then we'll go from there. But again, be sure to stay locked into GamecockCentral.com for all your live updates, stories, all your coverage on baseball from the SEC tournament. And again, I will be there starting tomorrow. So South Carolina begins action in the SEC tournament against Alabama at 2 p.m. on Tuesday on SEC Network. For GamecockCentral.com, I'm Jack Veltri. Have a good one, guys.